Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure meeting for Thursday, July 18th, 2024. And thank you for joining. I'd like to start in a good way by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Layla Bowen Island. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'll look to our Deputy Corporate Officer for any late items to be added. No late items, and with that, I will look for the MTFI approve the agenda for the July 18, 2024 meeting. Moved by Councillor Wake, second by Councillor Saunders. Any discussions, changes, amendments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously. Next up, 2.1 adoption of the minutes. Are there any changes, amendments, additions to the minutes? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to adopt the minutes of the June 13th meeting. Moved by Mr. Florendo, seconded by Mr. Nicholson. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments. I'll look to our Deputy Corporate Officer for any public comments here today.
We have one public comment in the Zoom, and we have one member of the public present. Would you like to make comments today, sir? At this time or at the end?
Also okay to spectate.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide.
You know what, Glenn is going to do his public comments first, and you can maybe let us know after how you feel.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Glenn, are you ready?
Yeah.
You are. Hi.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for your time today. I'm speaking today as the chair of the Snug Cove Sewer Committee, recognizing that you have some new business in front of you as a letter from Brad Hawthorne. And I just wanted to report that the members of the Snug Cove Sewer Committee have also had an opportunity to meet with Brad and discuss some of the information that he's also putting forward to this committee. And we just wanted to, first of all, thank Brad. There's a tremendous amount of information that he has gathered, spent a lot of time on this. Brad's experience in this field speaks for itself, and I think he has some interesting data that he has collected. This isn't just his opinion. I think it's some information that we can really gear into with the intent. I think, especially the committee, I think echoes this. We recognize that there's a need for significant investment into our sewer system for future development. But we also do believe that looking at some alternate approaches, specifically when it comes to the I&I issues that that Brad is specifically identifying, could lead to opportunities in which we could find some capacity within the current system to at least allow some high-value projects to move forward, if not lift the moratorium entirely. So I just wanted to echo that to this committee, that the Snug Cove Sewer Committee is in favor of an in-depth review of the information that Brad has collected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Permit. We appreciate your comments and for taking time out this afternoon to be here. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we will move on to updates. 4.1 capital project updates. Over to you, Director of Engineering, Mr. Graham.
Thanks. I haven't updated the spreadsheet, so I'll just provide a verbal update on what's gone on since our last meeting. The water treatment plant is, we are told, completed in terms of the repairs that needed to be done. Here at its factory, they wanted to run it for a period of time, make sure everything's set up and working the way it should. They've the last correspondence I've received from them that Brian, company owner, is that they still needed another part to make that run properly. They weren't able to do it this week, which was what scheduled. was supposed to arrive today. And hopefully next week they can run it and be a physician send it back to us the following week. That's all I have. Water treatment plant.
Patrick, well, if I may, or were you done? Sorry.
Yeah,
That part, was it a part that they didn't have in stock? Or? did you
well, it
get
was
there?
something they ordered. Apparently they needed some hoses to connect everything up. Raw water feed coming in and then the filtrate discharge. And they'd ordered those hoses a while back and discovered that one of them wasn't one that goes on filtrate was function.
Okay,
We don't have too much control.
no, but they,
When they say they want to run it for a bit, is that like a week or a month?
They said 1 to 2 weeks. So,
So we're into August now.
we're likely into August. But we get this back.
and when they run it, I don't, maybe Michael, you could ask this, or are they putting dirty water in, or is it just clean water to
We're
make?
using London tap water.
Oh,
It's just running.
like clean drinking, it's potable water going in and potable water coming out.
They're not treating anything.
We're not really treating it. Just running through the mechanics of.
Okay. Well, the real test will be when it gets back here.
So one question I did have is, so once it's all put together and that's with the part that's coming in with the hoses, then they're gonna run it for a couple of weeks. Have they given you any sort of, like, this is our checklist, this is what we're gonna be looking for a couple of weeks, or it's just pretty much, we're just gonna make sure everything works, like pretty vague? And then once they're done running it, what kind of reporting are we getting saying, you know, everything works, and are we gonna have any sort of independent check of it, or are we just gonna wait for it to show up at at the site and then assume everything's working well, plugging it? Have they given you any sort of additional information that can build up confidence that it's gonna show up here?
No, I haven't done like anything we call a checklist other than the verbal, and fairly vague. They want to check every component of the system. That we don't have.
You have an idea of what they've repaired already?
Well, I know they've repaired the filters. One of them had faulty effective membrane tube in it. And then the other one had become plugged. So they rehabilitated those membranes. So that was really the extent of the repairs. And then they had the viewers, the dewatering system. They've had that for a long time. They also wanted to connect all of that up together, make sure that it worked the way it's supposed to.
If they're just running tap water through, how do they, I mean, how do they? It's not cleaning or membraning anything. How do they like?
Well, they do. I mean, they would have difference in humidity levels on one side and the other. They're able to run the equipment and check that it's running the way it's all.
And when it malfunctioned here, did it just stop all of a sudden, or was it? It was just sending out that
I
the
mean, there was a few things that happened. At one point, yeah, it was high turbidity on the filtrate side, which is an indication that there's a breach somewhere.
Right.
And that was the faulty membranes. And then the membranes that you can't plug, what happened was it wouldn't run for very long before it needed a cleaning again.
And does it automatically shut down, like when it plugs?
No, it doesn't shut down, well, it shuts down in the sense that it goes into the cleaning cycle.
Oh, I see.
And then it's not producing water at that point. It's going through the cycle. That was happening. So,
There's someone else?
Let's go over to Council Wake. Council Wake.
We've still never had a reasonable explanation as to why they couldn't have done all this up here, which would have saved an incredible amount of time. And, I mean, we'd be able to test it with our water and, I mean, it just, I can't quite understand. Other than they didn't want it for now, why they couldn't do what they're doing.
So what they said is they're set up to do it in their shop and they weren't willing to bring whatever it is they needed out here to do it here.
But they didn't say what that was.
They didn't really specifically say this is what we need to heat up the membranes and clean them out. So we have everything we need here. So,
Maybe I just want to clarify, we're still going to go through a formal commissioning process once everything is here.
yeah, they'll still be sending out their senior technician. Be part of that.
Perfect.
So once we receive the package plan, we reinstall before we fire it up. We ensure that their senior tech is on site.
Okay.
And they participate in the firing up of the system, and then we invite PCH staff over as well.
I'm assuming that date hasn't been scheduled yet.
No, we need to know what it's
You
going
need to receive it first.
Are we still going ahead and checking the intake in the lake? It's gonna be clean enough to snuff so that we know from our end, the lake end going into the system, it's the best it possibly could be. Are we still gonna do that? I thought we talked about sending a diver down to clean it all up and make sure.
We haven't taken any action on
Are we gonna do that still, or? You know,
it. Could do that. No. Concerned about the intake.
well,
Interest of-
I guess I'm thinking belt and suspend, you know,
Yeah.
we should do everything possible at our end to make sure that what's going into the new plant. They can't say, well, it worked in London, we don't know why it's not working here. I don't,
Yeah, if there's anything we could do right now to really be prepared for it to come and plug in, we might as well do it. Close to.
Are there other areas besides just the intake that you might foresee that would be worth taking a look at? Because the general sense I get just from these comments is that if it comes in and doesn't work, we want no excuses from our end that
Yeah.
yeah,
We haven't done everything that we could.
But just to follow up on that, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Saunders. Aside from the intake, are there any other pieces you foresee that might need some attention or that we could actively look at?
like, so, do we need to flush the line from the intake to the plant? Do we need to flush that line? Is there any chance that sediments built up in that line in the meantime or anything?
Yeah, we flush the system regularly,
Okay,
annual basis.
annual. So is that a typical protocol? Is it once a year?
Flushing. System.
Well, maybe we should consider flushing it now so that when Mr. Buttons or is it senior engineer comes, like the mayor said, we don't have any loose ends at our end. Sorry.
Councilor Sanders?
So counterpoint to that, well, I get the point of saying, let's have everything perfect. I'd rather see the real world conditions and see if it's gonna work then, because if we set it up and it's all, you know, like lab condition kind of thing, and it works, and 6 months later, the real world is back and it doesn't work, I'd rather know that today than 6 months from now.
I mean, the real world will be as soon as they turn it on, as soon as they turn on the intake.
Yeah.
It's gonna suck the water it needs to,
Yeah,
right? But I'm thinking like, for example, they just said, oh, we need these hoses. Right, let's make sure we
Yeah,
have
that-
those
those kinds of
hoses,
things.
any of the connections, anything that we might need, so we're ready for it to go in and
yeah.
we're not waiting for a part that we don't have or that has failed in between, in the meantime.
Yeah, and what's been removed is going back. And everything that's needed to connect it up is
It's here.
still sitting.
And then so I heard just to get finer on the language, because we did discuss taking a look at that intake at a previous meeting, and I hear it's something that we could do. Is it like, are we going to do it, or is that worthwhile to do? I'm just curious as to the value of that and what the actual direction is going to be.
Well, I do understand the value of checking everything. So.
Okay.
Doing that. Action,
What kind of lead time do we need to get that done?
sure.
So I can hear you.
Hopefully we can get it done.
And so moving forward on other capital projects.
Okay, the Harbor Road Bridge is underway, it's been removed, foundations have been removed, and we're just getting some new footings formed up. Temporary bridge installed for pedestrians. Doing well. The other update really relates to all of the water system improvement components, the Bowen Bay well upgrades, the Blue water mains, and the Eagle Cove Bay connection water main, and then all of the related culverts. The tender for that project was closed. And we do have one bid that's substantially lower than all of the others. And does enable us to move forward with the projects. There is a shortfall in the blue water budget of approximately 400,000. That was the main point in the staff report that was attached to the agenda. So there's a need to either reduce the scope of the project or find a way to secure additional funds for the project through the idea that's been put forward is through internal borrowing. And for the Eagle Cliff component of the project, that's the budget is looking good relative to the available budget and the available grant funding. So we're not so concerned about that one. The wastewater outfall project is design still underway. Same with the service yard upgrades. For our road rehabilitation work, about some of that work's been done on Cowan Road and Upton Trail. The Bowen Bay Road rehabilitation has been deferred until mid-August. That's about all I have in the way of updates, projects that we advanced since our last meeting. Questions around that?
Any for any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to new business 5.1, Snug Cove Sewer System Wastewater Treatment Plant. Letter from Brad Hawthorne, plus there were some follow-ups and some data that he submitted to us. Turn it over to our Director of Engineering for his take. Where we are moving on that.
Okay, well, we've just received a review from Urban Systems of Brad's analysis. And I haven't had a chance to go through it in the kind of detail that I would like. In general, there's what he's saying is generally not incorrect. There is a lot of the issues that we're having are related to infiltration during wet weather. It's not easy or inexpensive to address that. I mean, we've taken some measures to deal with some of the low-hanging fruit and assets that we can see, mainly the manholes. There and some of the suggestions he makes about pursuing a more formal and rigorous program, hiring some consultant support to guide us through that, I think is a good idea. That's something that we should look at budgeting for. It's not, regardless of that being the reason for higher flows that we get, we have a permit to discharge that has an upper limit of 227 cubic meters per day, and we're not permitted to exceed that. We have exceeded that, so it's not in terms of the suggestion that we should walk back the restrictions on additional connections to the system. It's not really something that we could do in light of that. It would be after you've proven that you've reduced your flows that you can actually go back and accept more load onto the system. I guess the other point is that the discussion about load on the system has been focused entirely on the hydraulic load, which is the biggest limiting factor with our that flows. There are still constraints related to the biological load as well. So the nutrient load that isn't related to inflow and infiltration. It's related to the load on the system itself. So it's I think as a summary of what he's saying is that maybe the most valuable part of it is shining the light on what more we could be doing with respect to inflow and infiltration. And so that's something we should and will take further action on. But I don't think the suggestion that we rescind the restrictions on connected to the system, I don't think it's something we can do at this point.
Mr. Flando, then Councilor Saunders.
So, will the task force get access to the response from urban systems?
I don't see why not.
That's good. And did urban comment on, and I know there's the two types of loading, hydraulic and individual loading. Did they comment on the hydraulic loading calculations in the past and potential plant capacity that Brad included in his letter? Where they, in a sense, did they agree, disagree that there is capacity currently shown in the plant from a hydraulic loading perspective that could potentially accommodate additional connections? And if so, are they coming up with the same numbers that Brad is, or the same level of capacity?
Well, I guess they're saying it's not broadly correct, but it's not focusing on the right thing, in the sense that he's showing a scenario where there's generally higher flows occurring over the course of the year related to higher load on the system, but with similar levels of peak flows. And so it's those peaks that happen that really govern what we're able to connect to the system. So no, I mean, you can't accommodate, just because you have capacity to accommodate additional load for 98% of the year, doesn't mean you can actually accommodate additional load. It's exceeding your permitted limits, not other 2%.
Yeah, when it exceeds, you're over your limits, right?
Yeah.
And so the question becomes then, what do you do to address the exceedance?
Yeah.
Right. And so if urban generally agrees that the plant does have capacity for the majority of the year, except during, I think it shows during the winter rain events is likely where we have the exceedance, right? What are your thoughts? Did they recommend anything else in terms of how to address the exceedance? Because you typically don't want to design plant for like a 1%, right?
Yeah.
Right. You want it to operate predominantly for the majority of the situations, although you do want to make sure you have it addressing either I&I or other high flow components.
Well, bringing more reductions in systems is what we needed to reduce the peaks. So there's various approaches that we could take there. I mean, at this point, you're starting to send cameras down the pipes that you can look at all of the individual connections. And I think it's something that needs assistance from a professional to help us through. But it's I&I reduction. It's the only way to bring those peaks down. And the other thing they said is that we're not, it's not far, we're not dramatically out of line with the rest of the region. What other jurisdictions are seeing their I&I and well, weather peaks relative to dry load flows. So it's the easy part, or the easy reductions in I&I we taken action on, and further reductions become exponentially more difficult than expected.
But they haven't, other than a broad estimate of what the fees might be or the cost of that might be, they haven't looked at it in any more detail in terms of like this catchment versus that catchment.
No,
At this point, okay,
that's
that
something
would likely be a next step to
yeah,
look at.
it may not be with urban systems. service that you have to procure.
Council Summers?
Thank you. Well, my first question was already asked, which was we have access to that report, which is great. Secondly, just kind of came to mind. If the strategy is to reduce I and get those peaks down below, how long do you have to show that before? Like, do we have to wait a year and show that there's never been a peak over that before you can then say, okay, remove? Okay,
You have to wait at least until you have the wet weather events.
okay.
That would normally occur. So we went through this with the phase one upgrade where we did the work, the attenuation tank that was installed, and we have to be able to. And we also, even before the attenuation tank was completed, we did a bunch of I&I work. Then you need these big rain events to demonstrate
So they need to address that we're rolling 1 year.
it may not be a full year, but you need to go through the wet weather cycle to ensure that you've actually addressed the problem.
Okay.
So I just want to echo what Patrick was saying around there not being an opportunity to walk back the restriction on connections until we've demonstrated the ability to not exceed the permit requirement. So there's a very clear permit threshold, which we have been exceeding, and we cannot continue to do that. And so we cannot add connections.
So even if we thought we fixed the problem today, everything gets explained before we could actually show anything and then potentially walk something back.
Unless we dramatically increase the capacity at the plant.
No, yeah, I understand that, but without increasing the capacity, we're essentially best case is next spring.
That's right.
Okay.
Is there, I'm just throwing this out, is there a way to involve citizenry in alternate laundry days or something like to kind of modulate the capacity of the plant that we're asked citizens to, I don't know.
The
That ever-
biggest impact is the I&I at this point, right? Because I think the calculations are showing that, you know, even just the dry weather flows are, the plant can handle that. That's not correct?
Yeah.
Like based on our current population, so based on the number of connections to the plant and the current makeup of the sewerage area, plant can handle all the dry weather flows. Including the folks that can't connect yet, but they're in within the sewage.
Yeah, peaks are the problem.
Yeah.
And to echo what Patrick had said too earlier about chasing I&I, it has diminishing returns on investment. So and that was the one of the initial responses from Urban Systems to us is that you've reached a ratio of I&I that is consistent with municipal systems. And so you're no longer have a inordinately high I&I compared to most municipal systems. And so if you want, you can continue to chase that, or you can increase capacity at the plant.
And did they calculate and estimate the I&I based on Metro Vancouver's current I&I guidelines?
I don't know.
Because that would be a good thing for them to do, right? There's a process procedure that's accepted here in the Lower Mainland. I believe Brad's looked at it, but it would be great to get a professional opinion going through that process to see if they're coming up with the same numbers.
It was similar to the EPA.
I think when the I&I standard was prepared by Metro, they looked at EPA and other references to it.
But the bottom line is that, or if I may say, is that this is controlling the future development, right? The hookups, planning for development, and the lag, the time between coming up with a more robust fix, whether it's I&I or plant expansion, that's like a year, at least a year, right? I'll wait.
Yeah.
So, and then for, just from my own understanding, so the exceedances at this point are being driven by I&I, is that? Okay. And then, in terms of the dry weather flow, what does that indicate about our capacity? Like, where are we at in terms of, okay, order of magnitude percent capacity in terms of dry weather flow?
I'm not sure.
Not sure. Okay. And then the comments that we've had on I&I so far, from our consultants, I believe Mr. Barnard spoke to this a little bit. It sounds like we've talked about it generally, but we haven't done anything like smoke testing or putting cameras in places or anything. And then I know it was last minute, but I did see that Brad did send us a letter yesterday, I think, that was copied to Steph, which I forwarded on very, very recently to this group. But he was talking about, I think what he's done is he's been able to parse out some of the catchment data of the various components of the system, and you know, the one in his letter from yesterday is speaking about Miller Road subcatchment, which I'm speaking to it because it's the newest area. It's constructed in 2018. Only a few are connected, but based on his data, he's saying that the subcatchment has obvious I&I issues, which are well beyond the typical limit, which are indicating there's no groundwater infiltration component, but it might be stormwater infiltration, and suggesting that we do some things like smoke testing or bag testing. Have you looked at stormwater infiltration in that area, or like across the system generally?
We haven't looked at stormwater filtration. Yeah.
Is that the line that runs to Snug Cove House on Miller Road?
That would be that pump station from Snug Cove House.
No,
That's right.
Yeah, and I guess just to clarify, Brad did send 2 letters.
Right.
One for the Miller Road sewer shed and one for the Snug Cove Road sewer shed catchments. And he was using municipal data.
Yeah.
And so I think that's similar to what I mentioned before. It would be worthwhile to go through. And it's noted here in Metro Vancouver's inflow and infiltration management plan template. It was developed back in 2022 for these catchments, just to confirm, you know, what are we seeing from an inflow and infiltration perspective? And based on the information that Brad provided, it does look like it is, you know, predominantly related to stormwater and stormwater effects, even though some of it could be lagging behind the actual the storm duration. And I think it'd be worthwhile to get better indication of what I&I strategies could be used in the various catchments and what that cost might be. Then at least you can compare it to the plant free cost.
Who's this? Letter sent?
It was just yesterday. It was to Mayor and Council.
And I didn't include it, I missed it, we were at a.
Patrick doesn't
event.
get
I
those.
Right.
can share them now, do you want me to share screen?
Yeah.
As well, okay.
I don't think there's a need to share them on the screen. So like, you know, because what I'm also parsing in my head is just, you know, from the standpoint of process, and I also don't want to, you know, it's unfair, I think, to overwhelm technical staff with new technical data that probably needs to be taken away and processed and thought about and responded to. And I know that we were going to have a presentation from Mr. Hawthorne earlier this week, but due to personal circumstances, that didn't happen. I understand that in speaking to the CAO, that we are taking this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we are taking this data and that we're going to be putting it into like a technical response for the Center Urban Systems and going to be come back and review by council. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, so Patrick would review that report. So Urban Systems has already done work on it. And then Patrick and staff need time to review, which will then come back to this committee and to.
I think the, you know, and I'll let the counselors in the room on the committee, as well as the council that's visiting in the room here as well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would be helpful for council, and then when this committee comes back in September, in that review from Urban Systems, in that review from staff, if we can have some of the considerations that have been raised here today, such as the Metro, you know, concordance with the Metro Vancouver I&I guidelines, Urban Systems reviewing, if we can parse out all of the information that we've got from Mr. Hawthorne so far in terms of his letters, his underlying data, these additional letters, and then what's the, not necessarily what's the validity of it, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing around the table, it's like in general terms, what Mr. Hawthorne is speaking to here is correct. Also in general terms, we've done some initial work on I&I, but we haven't gone as far as anything like smoke testing, camera testing, dye testing, separating, you know, groundwater versus stormwater data, which I think he's done. And then looking at the various subcatchments as well. So the pieces of the Metro Vancouver guidelines, the subcatchments, validating Mr. Hawthorne's data as well as commenting on it. And then eventually when it comes to this committee and comes to council next, like the ultimate, I think, decision that I still feel fuzzy on, and I'm not, you know, I'll look to Councillor Lake and Councillor Saunders here, maybe Councillor Getty in the back of the room, is that there's going to be, and I'll look to the engineers in the room, I'm sure there's, when you look at some kind of cost benefit graph, it's going to be, you know, what is the expense of dealing with the I&I issue versus how much more capacity and you know, is it going to address it in the exceedances, right? And that's where it's there's going to need to be some decision of does council want to chase this at all, and are we going to allocate money to this, and is this going to be a strategy that we want to follow versus, okay, well, based on what we're hearing from Urban Systems, based on, you know, I'm sure we'll have Brad here in September, October. When this report comes back, we can get everybody in the room. Like, there's going to need to be a decision made on the Snug Cove sewer as to whether, like, is it valuable to deal with I&I? What is the strategy for an I&I in the various subcatchments? Or are we just going to put this to bed and look at funding a, you know, a $6 to $8 million new capacity upgrade and just live with the exceedances? Because that's sort of, that feels like that's what the decision is. You're nodding, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice when people nod.
People are listening and it's making sense.
It's making sense, right? You know, and I say that because I'm not, you know, one of the purposes of this committee is that I'm not a technical engineer, I'm not a technical person, but we're also decision makers that have to be able to make these decisions responsibly, and that's really the information that we're here at the end of the day. Anything that you would add, councillors, Councillor Wake?
Notwithstanding that, you know, we're not tech people, what I'm struggling with here is we don't have any numbers. If we could have some percentages around what percentage, you know, when we're hitting exceeding, what percentage of that is stormwater and what percentage is actual biological load. And we're hearing that it's diminishing returns to that some quantifying amount of that. Like if we got 25% more of the I&I taken out, then we're going to be more capacity, or do we need to hit 50 or 75%? But just in terms of what does diminishing returns is kind of a qualitative statement, what a quantitative statement.
Councilor Saunders?
I would suspect to get a proper quantitative assessment that it's gonna cost quantitatively some dollars too, so. Yeah, I mean, if he's right, we do need to do that, but that's not gonna be free to get that kind of detail.
No, and so it's, I mean, so the initial work done, and I just want to impress upon the committee and those that might be listening, that this is an issue that staff have taken very seriously since staff became aware of the concern, which really was only in 2019, 2020, when it actually came to light that the capacity of the treatment plant wasn't what it was expected to be, and that there were significant issues. And since then, staff have been paying pretty close attention to it, and doing the best that we can with the limited resources that we have to try to address this along with multiple other priorities in the community. And so we lean pretty heavily on our professional consultants that we hire to support us in this work. And the advice given to us by those consultants was to initiate immediately phase one of the upgrade project, which was the attenuation tank, which we did, while at the same time initiating immediate response to the I&I issues that were readily apparent, which we also did. And the advice following that was, well, continuing to chase the I&I while having benefits, it does have diminishing returns on the investment, and it's not quantified, but it's just, that's a well understood statement in the industry that you can chase I&I all you want, you will never get rid of it all. Systems leak unless you have like a vacuum system, which we're never gonna contemplate for.
Did Urban or your consultants looking at the I&I issue kind of provide any commentary on the types of I&I? There's I&I, there's lots of different types of I&I, right? And there's some that, are likely easier and more cost effective to treat. And if that's the version of I&I that is causing the majority of the inflow into our system, then, or it's just a blanket, like right now we're getting too expensive to treat I&I versus like there's these one we're seeing. It sounds like they haven't done that level of detail.
Yeah, we haven't done the more detailed analysis, and it seems like Brad is doing that homework. And we did spend hours with Brad Hawthorne to discuss some of his initial analysis, and it looks like he's done even more in-depth analysis, which could be proved to be super helpful. But it is incumbent on us to validate that.
Sure.
And if what Brad is alluding to is supported with our own analysis and assessment, then there may be some cost-effective ways to shave some of those peaks, which would free up capacity for some additional connections. But we're gonna need time and
You'll need to do the work.
yeah, time and money to do that work. So.
Okay. So just for clarity from staff, then what is from this information, because it's also what is it? One of the eccentricities of being in a small community is that we get outside pieces of information like this from community members that now is coming into our wheelhouse and then passing it along and dealing with it. So I'm curious, just out of this conversation and out of the information that we've received from Brad, what are we coming back with specifically for this community and council in the fall?
Well, I think I think what we need to do at staff level is to review the response from urban systems. At the same time, reviewing this more recent information from Mr. Hawthorne. And then formulating staff's own opinion to then come back to this committee and the council with a report to sort of say, okay, well, considering all of this information, here's the recommended path forward. And from what I've seen today, I would imagine there'd be some I&I opportunities or I&I reduction opportunities. And but my sense would be is that if we truly want to accommodate the growth that's anticipated in the Cove, there still needs to be a treatment plant capacity upgrade. We're not going to be able to accommodate all of that with I&I because there's also certain thresholds of volume that we are allowed to discharge before we start triggering municipal sewage regulation requirements for increased capacity and redundancy requirements, which, so regardless of I&I, we are going to have to effectively double our treatment capacity just to meet provincial regulations once you hit a certain volume threshold. Right. Let's say we reduce the I&I and we free up enough capacity and we want to add Snug Cove House and Birch project and X, Y, and Z, then all of a sudden we could find ourselves, well, we've hit this provincial trigger that then requires a doubling of the actual treatment plant capacity.
Do we know where, I mean, if we add those loads to the current system, will we be over that trigger right now?
Can't remember the numbers right now.
We're pretty close to the figuring the MWR registration requirement, which as you mentioned brings with it some redundancy obligations. Not sure how many developments we take to reach that, but it's pretty close.
That would likely be something good to know from a planning perspective.
Well, that'd be good to know when we have these meetings in September, or October. Be good to know that. I was gonna ask you, the general thrust of the provincial policies, are they pro ocean outfall or is land disposal verboten? What's your sense of
Well, on
the technologies and against the provincial statutes?
So on the coast, the Minister of Environment is highly reluctant to allow for land discharge to land. So it has to be to an aquatic environment, preferably the marine environment. You can get some leniency in the interior of the province, but even then they still want it going to a receiving body.
And that's based on like the state of the art science, like.
Yeah, they're not keen on discharges to land.
Typically, discharge to land, you need a lot of land.
A lot of land,
redundancy,
ton of land.
no
Even-
matter how clean you get the water.
Yeah, even in the interior, like where it can be dry as a bone and you've got gravels that go on for hundreds of feet, they'll let you do it, but you still have to have an overflow bypass to a receiving body, so.
And typically double the area.
And that trigger that triggers the redundancy requirement threshold, which we just talked about. That requires the ability to double plant capacity, have that availability, or you have to budget for that in a municipal budget, or what exactly?
You have to build it.
We have to build, you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Once you get over that threshold, you're.
Registered with that municipal wastewater regulation, you have to be able to demonstrate that your plant can treat the peak loads into
Yeah.
the system with the largest bioreactor
Right.
offline for whatever reason.
I get you. And where are we on their radar, right? Are we on their radar or is we are on the radar? Okay. All right.
If you move to, so the one idea that people have been talking about too is like, you can, move to on-site system to reduce demand on the sewer system. So if you're moving some of these developments to on-site septic, then you may be able to reduce demand on the sewer. But by moving to on-site for some of these bigger developments, you're reducing the financial contributions that are required to help support the expansion of the plan. So it's that's a bit of a catch situation. So, I've been trying to sort of encourage or message that the preference is to bring any of the new developments in the code onto the system. And so if we can, you know, like slow down, well, right now everything's at a full standstill. So,
Right.
but if there's a way to, you know, work with the potential development community and ourselves to look at how we can finance an expansion or increase capacity, then that would be the preferred solution. Alternatively, we'll end up with a multitude of on-site systems scattered throughout the code.
Well, we have that now, right? I mean, the community center's on septic, Stunco House is on septic, Birch, and I guess the fire hall must be as well, right?
And medical health center.
And Nelson.
Fire hall's on the system.
Oh, fire hall's on the system.
Yeah.
It looked like you were parsing something. No, Councilor Wade.
Well, it just feels to me like we're ignoring the reality here that this isn't gonna work either way. We have to find a way to make one of those things work. And I'm understanding that there's a lot of new technology. You look to Europe and the examples over there. I don't know a lot about it, but it's, you know, secondary or tertiary treatment. We do have it in place in Canada. I'm aware of it because of this backcountry lodge that I'm involved with up at Lake Lahara, where they have a treatment plant and the effluent is literally potable water. It's not palatable water, but it's potable water. There's no danger to it. And it gets dispersed in the disposal burn disposal field or evaporation field. And with the surface or anything, but the amount of space required for it. I mean, this is for a facility that accommodates 100 people. That's on-site treatment that doesn't require like 2 times the area for septic. But what I'm understanding is that in order to get approval in the first place, even if you intend to go to a system like that, you need to demonstrate capacity to do it in septic. And that sounds like something that, you know, if we're encouraging all this development and all this housing, we have to be looking at that limitation. Because you don't have that limitation in other jurisdictions. That's what I'm sitting here trying to figure out, you don't have an answer.
Right. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that there's going to be a review of Mr. Hawthorne's data, or staff will review Mr. Hawthorne's data, review urban systems response, synthesize those pieces, provide a path forward, come back to us in fall, September, October, whenever it is. Any other points that I'm missing from our conversation here that we should be reporting back?
Urban systems response should include the 2 recent letters as well. Have one, just roll it all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you, receive the Hawthorne letters?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, send those on to that.
Ultimately, we need a recommendation from urban systems that says, yes, this data is good, matches with our understanding. And what it means is that, you know, there's there's not enough room with a reasonable amount of I reduction to add in. Is it that way, or is it Brad is saying is there is? Right, we need to get a professional opinion on which one of those is.
We cannot add any connections at the current time. I can say that confidently, like, it doesn't matter. Like, if we have exceedances at the plant, which we do, then we cannot add. We cannot add connections. Until those exceedances have been proven to have been managed that and not occurring, you run the risk of the municipality being sued $1 million a day or the CAO going to jail. So that's pretty clear in the legislation. You can be fined by the provincial government or the federal government.
So that gets into the lag time of, you have to wait for the
You gotta-
rain, you have to demonstrate, it's gonna be at least a minimum of a year.
Yeah, and if you knowingly add capacity to the system that is already at capacity, then you are negligent in the duty to provide the service that you're providing.
So when I said whether or not we can add, that would mean whether or not we can add once we have modified and
Yes,
cut for a year.
that's an important part.
But there's quite a difference between something that will allow capacity a year or 18 months from now, as opposed to a new plant, which is gonna be, I can't even imagine how many years that's gonna be.
Right.
Because we see no path to getting there right now.
And that's the sort of data that I think we need back, because it's, you know, I think that lead time question to me is foremost in my mind. It's, well, if you can eke out extra capacity in 12 to 18 months versus trying to finance a new plant that nobody knows where the money's coming from unless, you know, the provincial or federal governments want to write us a nice check. And Metro Vancouver certainly isn't coming to our rescue in any way, shape, or form. There's going to need to be a decision making strategically, if you know, at the staff and council level of, do I look at I&I? Is it going to be a straight wastewater treatment plant build, or is it going to be some combination of both? And my sense right now is it's tricky. Like, I understand it's tricky data to dig into. It feels complex, and it feels a little bit like we've been in a paralysis of, like, mostly through resources of money. How are we going to do this? But you know, even having this conversation feels like one bite at a time. We're gonna eat the elephant. We're gonna start. So I think we're just getting on a path to get the data, to get the information, to have these conversations, to bring it back to the community. I don't think there's any other way. Biggest items.
Brad, do you, excuse me, do you think urban system appreciates the dilemma that we're in? Like, do they understand that we're in a completely hole, we're frozen? And it's critical that if they're gonna make an opinion on the I&I, that it be bona fide and correct, because, you know, if we can get 20 or 30 extra connections by spending a couple of $1 million on I&I, we need to know that, I think.
We're very aware of our situation.
Yeah, I mean, we were hounding them during the first initial push of the I&I reduction work. Like, I personally was hounding them.
Were they supervising that?
Well, they were doing the data analysis of the capacity increases from that work, and so they were, you know, and rightfully so, reluctant to provide, you know, firm and strong commitments to those increases, and but we were pushing pretty hard.
Yeah, well, they don't want to be on the losing side of the equation that takes you over the top, right?
Yeah. So they're keenly aware of the
Okay.
magnitude of the situation.
I think that feels good for now, unless there's anything else for the sake of time, we can move on. I see no further comments. Can I have someone move the recommendation from closed meeting, please? Moved by Councilor Wade, seconded by Mr. Florendo. Discussion, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye, that carries unanimously. We will receive the information items 6.1 and 6.2 by unanimous consent unless there's any objection. These are received. And 7 question periods. So question period is an opportunity for members of the public to request clarification or ask a follow-up question relating to an item discussed at the meeting. Questions must relate to an item on the agenda. Are there members of the public online or in the room here who would like to ask a question of the committee? Nope, seeing none. Next meeting, Thursday, September 12th, 2024. We can check our calendars when we're off the live stream. Nobody wants to see that. And I will look for a motion to adjourn, please. Councilor Saunders, seconded by Mr. Nicholson. All in favor, and say aye.